The Black Sea has turned into a grim stage for a new chapter in the war, a chapter defined by stealth, fire, and economic shockwaves. Over the past 48 hours, the waters off Turkey's coast saw the thunderous arrival of unmanned naval drones operated by Ukraine, striking deep at Russia's so-called shadow fleet. Among the vessels hit, 2 oil tankers, Kairos and Virat, flagged to Gambia, navigating toward Russia's major oil terminal at Novorossiysk to carry crude oil exports. As the small drones, part of the domestic naval arsenal known as Sea Baby, unmanned surface vehicles, closed in, the sea erupted. Explosions rocked the hulls. Kairos burst into flames. Its crew rushed to safety under frantic rescue operations by Coast Guard vessels. Virat was struck as well, sustaining serious damage that disabled its propulsion and rendered it effectively inoperable. Ukraine's security service quickly put forth a statement. These weren't random strikes. The drones disabled tankers capable of carrying tens of millions of dollars worth of oil, part of a broader effort to cut off Russia's oil revenue amid the ongoing war. Until now, much of Ukraine's sabotage campaign against Russia's energy chain had focused on refineries and pipelines on land, targeting terminals and processing facilities deep inside Russian territory. The shift to sea-based attacks marks a significant escalation. Rather than waiting for oil to be refined or shipped, Ukraine is now striking at the very point where crude oil begins its journey out of Russia. Analysts suggest this demonstrates Ukraine's growing mastery of drone warfare and its willingness to project force far beyond its shores. The implications ripple far beyond a few disabled ships. The vessels targeted belong to a network of older tankers used by Moscow to evade Western sanctions, the Shadow Fleet. By striking them, Ukraine sends a clear message. Even black market oil exports are not beyond reach. On a deeper level, this act tears at the economic lifeline Russia has relied on to finance its war efforts. With fewer tankers able to transport crude, and with loading terminals under growing threat, Moscow's ability to cash in on oil revenues becomes increasingly precarious. At the same time, the attack triggered alarm beyond the combat zone. The vessels were struck off the Turkish coast, inside the waters monitored by a NATO country. The government in Ankara registered its concern immediately. Turkish officials warned that such strikes endanger maritime safety, navigation, and the broader regional economy. For Kyiv, the strikes are more than damage to enemy property. They are psychological, a vivid demonstration that Russia's oil windfall is no longer safe. In one sweep, Ukraine exposed the vulnerability of an entire network designed to evade sanctions, casting doubt on Moscow's ability to continue hiding behind proxy tankers and flagged vessels. But for Moscow, the blow is serious. 2 tankers disabled at sea, a global scrutiny of shipping routes, insurance premiums rising, and a dark warning that even offshore vessels are no longer beyond reach. The war has entered a new phase, one where every tanker, every shipment, every barrel of oil becomes a potential target. This waterborne offensive raises the stakes for all: military strategists, energy markets, and geopolitical actors watching closely. The sea lanes have become battle lines. The shock rippled quickly across shipping markets and diplomatic capitals. Within hours, underwriters began repricing risk across the entire Black Sea. Voyages that only days before carried modest war insurance premiums now shot up dramatically. For the first time in this conflict, a single naval drone attack triggered a measurable ripple across global energy and trade markets. Insurance for a standard week-long passage for ships calling at Ukrainian ports climbed to roughly 0.5%, up from 0.4%. But for journeys into Russian-controlled ports on the Black Sea, traditionally more expensive, the rate surged to between 0.65% and 0.8%. Up from about 0.6% just last week. The recalibration of risk was more than financial. It exposed how fragile Moscow's oil export lifelines have become. Every tanker journey now carries the specter of drones, fire, and loss. The war, already raging on land, expanded into commerce. Politically, the blaze off the coast stirred nervous condemnations and a rare moment of clarity for a regional power caught in the middle. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, whose country controls the Bosphorus Strait and much of the gateway from Black Sea to Mediterranean, called the attacks unacceptable. He framed them as a direct threat to navigation safety, environmental security, and the stability of neighboring states. His warnings were pointed. The targeting of merchant tankers within Turkey's exclusive economic zone amounts to a worrying escalation, risking not only lives and property, but also regional trade at large. That reaction underscores a precarious truth. By striking these ships, the war has spilled into corridors meant for commerce, grain shipments, and global energy flows. What was once a contested sea of naval skirmishes now carries an increasingly dangerous undertow. On Kiev's side, there is no backpedaling. Officials point directly to the ship's status on sanction lists. The tankers were flagged as part of Moscow's Shadow Fleet, a network Western capitals have long condemned for evading embargoes and shuttling Russian oil to markets. The message was explicit. If Russia persists in funneling crude through vessels meant to circumvent sanctions, those vessels are legitimate targets. Dramatically, the offensive has reshaped how the world sees maritime risk. Insurers, shipping companies, brokerages, all are reassessing routes, recalibrating risk, and in some cases, suspending plans altogether. Ships once bound for Russian ports are now ghosting away, rerouting, or postponing, and the knock-on effect extends beyond oil. Grain, fertilizer, raw materials, many of which pass through the Black Sea, are now exposed to the same logistical and risk contagion. For Moscow, this is more than a tactical setback. Each tanker disabled, each route disrupted chips away at the financial foundation underpinning its war, revenue from oil sales. As long as exports are threatened, arms, munitions, logistics, payrolls all come under pressure. The war economy that seemed robust is showing cracks. In the immediate aftermath, business, global, regional, local, becomes a tool of war. As ships reroute around the Mediterranean, as insurers demand higher premiums, it isn't just Russia paying the price. The reverberations spread across commodity markets, food supply chains, and economies far beyond the Eastern European theater. And for states like Turkey, this escalation poses a stark dilemma. Ankara has tried to straddle neutrality, maintaining relations with Kyiv and Moscow, keeping essential passage through the Bosphorus open, and preserving export routes for grain and goods. Yet now, with attacks in its waters, it must weigh the economic interests, maritime safety, and regional stability. Erdogan's condemnation is a signal that the calculus may be shifting. As Black Sea waves carry smoke and insurance notices, the war is no longer just about territory and frontline trenches. It is also about supply chains, commerce, global markets, and whether a drone can effectively silence a tanker and reshape the fate of nations. The sea grew darker long before the flames vanished on the horizon. Not long after the attacks on the tankers, Kairos and Virat, fresh alarms sounded. A third tanker, Mid-Volga II, came under attack in the Black Sea, roughly 130 kilometers off Turkey's coast. The ship was carrying sunflower oil destined for Georgia. Though its 13-member crew escaped unharmed and no request for assistance was made, the incident marked a dangerous escalation. Merchant vessels, not military ships, were now in the crosshairs. This latest strike shattered any lingering notion that commercial traffic could skirt danger. The waters that once ferried grain, oil, and trade goods quietly had become theaters of war. Industry insiders, already reeling from the first two hits, now reinterpret every vessel's shadow as a potential target. Insurance underwriters responded swiftly. War risk premiums surged again, a tacit acknowledgement that the threat had broadened. Voyages to Ukrainian ports were now priced higher, and routes to Russian ports, once marginally more expensive, surged into far riskier territory. For the operators still bold enough to move vessels through the Black Sea, this meant a heavy choice: proceed with skyrocketing costs and existential danger, or retreat, and render Russia's oil export system even more brittle. Global energy markets shuddered. Buyers, shippers, traders all began recalibrating supply chains. Grain bound for Europe, fertilizers heading to emerging markets, crude oil waiting to be refined, all now faced delays, reroutes, or outright cancellations. The price ripple extended far beyond the conflict zone. At the heart of this campaign is a grim arithmetic. Each disabled tanker carves a deeper wound into Moscow's war economy. These vessels are not arbitrary targets. They belong to what many in the international community call the Shadow Fleet, ships flagged offshore, often under obscure registries, used to smuggle sanctioned Russian oil to market. By striking these vessels at sea, the attackers cut at the arteries of Moscow's war financing. But there is a geopolitical cost unfolding in real time. The attacks occurred within waters partially under the jurisdiction of Turkey, a NATO member with control over the Bosporus and access to the Black Sea. Turkish leadership has responded with serious concern. Recep Tayyip Erdogan publicly condemned the attacks as unacceptable, warning that they jeopardize maritime safety, endanger lives, and threaten environmental and economic stability in Turkey's exclusive economic zone. Ankara has signaled it will issue stern warnings to all involved parties. For Turkey, the balance it has tried to maintain between offering diplomatic channels, preserving trade, and avoiding deeper entanglement is under strain. Each explosion in its waters chips away at that balance. For Russia, the message is stark. Even its clandestine logistics and shadow shipping networks are no longer safe. And for the world, the Black Sea, once a relatively quiet conduit for energy and commerce, is becoming a front line. The stakes have shifted. What began as targeted sabotage has evolved into maritime warfare. Commercial shipping lanes have transmuted into zones of risk. Global energy flows are disrupted. Geopolitical stability in a region long used to fragile calm teeters under the weight of every drone-launched strike. The consequences are only beginning to unfold. Nations, markets, and businesses must now decide. Adapt to this new reality, or risk being swept under by it. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with the latest news that 11 tells you on TV.